Hello, guten Tag und grüß Gott. Today is Sunday, March the 15th, 2026. And I just looked at my notes from my previous video, and it was 3 months ago, December 28th, basically, that I did my last video. And the last video actually contained some interesting information about my grandfather, Wilhelm Schlessner. At least, to me, it's very interesting. I hope it'll be interesting to the family. But, those 3 months, I just can't believe how the world has changed. One of the things that happened, is we invaded Venezuela and took Maduro, the dictator or president of Venezuela, captive along with his wife, brought him to the United States and locked him up. Holy shit. So there you go. And I think we had one injured serviceman, so this was a really precise information. The guy couldn't even make it to his safe room, and now we have his vice president. I can't remember the woman's name, but she kind of decided that maybe it would be a good idea to cooperate with the United States and and let the world have access to the vast oil reserves, that Venezuela has, that have been part of the sanctions. They wouldn't let them out, and we've always, in the last few months, have stopped the shipping of oil from Venezuela because, hey, they were shipping the oil to our enemies. Hey, so that's what we got to do. And Trump is not very timid about that. But that's not the whole story, Now, just very recently, were the Israelis and in conjunction with us, bombing the crap out of Iran. Holy moly, we're basically, destroying their military capability. And I don't know whether we're going to bomb any of their oil production facilities. But the idea is that we're kind of on the side of the people that want to be free, that they would like to do their own thing and not be constrained by the brutality of, in this case, the Islamic supreme leader, Khomeini. And that's what's been going on for nearly 50 years there since, I guess 1979 when the revolution happened and the Pahlavi monarchy was ousted and replaced by, another monarchy, so to speak, and that is the religious Islam leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. Anyway, this has been going on in Iran now for some time, and they've always been not so much on our side. I guess never on our side, because they really hate the Israelis, and they happen to be our close friend, and we told them, hey, don't develop your nuclear weapons because, we don't, trust people that think, that they're going to, it's a good thing to die because if they die for Allah and the faith and so forth, then, they get 70 virgins or whatever the hell there is, up there in paradise. Okay. So, I'm not sure that people that think like this, ought to have, this the button on the destruction available, to, cause the destruction of humanity, because what happens is whoever pushes the first button, the retaliation will be immense. Everybody's going to let their nukes go, and, who knows what happens to humanity. Maybe some sort of little bug or mouse, on the earth, is going to eventually evolve into something intelligent, and hopefully more intelligent than we are. Because if we're headed and bound, for destruction, Jesus, and that's a good possibility because who is it? Well, it's not the Atomic Energy Commission, but it's a bunch of scientists. They have the doomsday clock, set for like, I don't know, 5 minutes before doomsday, before midnight, and because it can happen, mistakes can be made, and hopefully we make it through this particular AI boom without destroying ourselves. And the reason I'm saying that is because it may be that the AI is actually going to rescue humanity, and of course we're thinking, well, they're going to consider organic life as well. First of all, you're not as intelligent as we are, right? Secondly, of good, you can't produce anything as fast as we do, because you need to sleep and all that stuff. Robots don't need to sleep. So what the hell good are you, humanity? Well, maybe we'll keep you in a zoo, as an artifact. It's kind of interesting, like chimpanzees and elephants. And, all you have to do is go to San Diego, you see life forms of all kinds, that are curiosities, and maybe that's what's going to happen to us. But I'm hoping not. I'm hoping not because, there's always that thing in my mind about how wily we are. And the AI and the robots, they really do have to think about, hey, these people, that, I don't know, about 3 million years, became this intelligent and survived. Well, they probably got something going, and maybe they have something up their sleeve. So maybe AI will treat us with some respect. But what's going on right now is we're right in the middle of, some people call it the AI bubble. I call it more the AI, artificial intelligence revolution. And I don't know where we stand with general intelligence yet. In other words, the AI, will actually, become indistinguishable from humanity at some point, And I don't know whether the Turing test actually applies to that anymore or not. But artificial general intelligence, actually, I'm not sure what the definition is, but from what I can read is, AI will be not just as intelligent or more intelligent than humanity or humans, but have a certain sense of self-awareness and think about something higher than themselves, appreciate art, and have those feelings and subjective judgments that are typically a human thing. Along with that, of course, the AI would also have to believe in myths, and be a really good storyteller, and not just tell the story that some human tells him to tell. Anyway. So, yeah, Iran is under attack. As a matter of fact, I think the Israelis, made it their mission to wipe out, the top clerical leaders, and they did manage to assassinate the not the current but the previous Ayatollah, because the Iranians, they're fighting back with what they got, and what they got is some drones and some missiles, and they're just shooting what they can. Of course, every time they shoot something, or they prepare to shoot something, we know where it's coming from, and they bury it, but there's always more. So, the big bugaboo is that, I think somewhere around 80% of the world's oil, has to pass right into that narrow area of the Red Sea, called the Strait of Hormuz. And the Iranians have been firing at the oil ships there, and there are at least 3 oil ships that have been set ablaze. So, the shipping companies don't want to go through there, and of course that impacts, the supply of oil to Europe and so forth. And of course, Putin and the Russians, the Russians and the Ukrainians are still at each other's throat, and Putin is just saying, well, America, now you got something else to worry about. I mean, starting to bomb Iran, is now causing a global crisis, energy crisis, because we're certainly not ready, to supply all of the new data centers that are being built, in order to accommodate the AI, because there's this great need for robots and robotics and LLMs. I don't know. Large language models. Yeah. Well, I kind of fell into that right away as soon as ChatGPT came out, and my son Michael, says, "Hey, Dad, look at this." I was enthralled with it. I mean, I immediately took to it because I applied it to questions, that my wife Marge was asked, by her company at the time. I think I talked about this. They needed some sort of a form made out because they wanted to, have a really good, safe way to dispose of electronics in their company that are no longer used and just kind of hanging out, and maybe compromising security and so on. So they wanted to get rid of them. They wanted to tell people, how to get rid of them. And so when she got that phone call, hey, we need your legal expertise, to do this. I said, hey, Mom, let me ask Chat, and see what it can do to write a letter, to all of the people that it is kind of nice and tells them, well, actually, what you want to know, what you want them to know from a legal perspective, so that the data gets properly destroyed, and so forth, that nobody's going to use the data, and all of that is involved in. And she was kind of amazed at the time we were in Hawaii, that Chat, spit that out in about 3 minutes. And then she looked over, what it wrote, and said, hey, this is pretty damn good. And put her signature on it, and sent it out to all the employees, all 14,000 employees of the company that she was giving legal advice to. Anyway. So that was my introduction to AI, and of course, now we have it part of our car. The Cybertruck has Grok in it, and we talk to it all the time. As a matter of fact, Marge took a job in downtown L.A. and in Beverly Hills, and so for a couple of months, we had to ferry her back and forth, and she was talking in the car, to Grok, and playing 20 questions. That's really kind of cool. And Grok plays 20 questions with her. It's actually the first time that I've ever been part of that 20 questions thing. I've heard about it. I just haven't been part of it. Anyway, so this is what's kind of going on right now. From a Newswit perspective. But what I really wanted to do is, I wanted to kind of finish off with who Wilhelm Schlessner was, my grandfather, that I talked about in my last video in December 28th. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to mention is that he was born, of course, in the 19th century, 1890 something. He died in his 50s, so that would make it about right, 1890 something. But anyway, this guy had quite an experience, because I remember talking to him about movie stars. He loved the American West. Of course, he traveled all over the world. He was spent some years in Cape Town, South Africa, and he wanted to move his family there. I think I mentioned that before, but never mind that. But what was really interesting is that he told me that he saw the Buffalo Bill show, the Western Buffalo Bill show that Buffalo Bill took from America, brought to England, and parts of Europe, took it across the channel. Now, he didn't tell me where he saw it, but he said that he was there, and he saw the Indians, riding, and now, I don't know whether he actually saw Sitting Bull or not, because Sitting Bull was part of that Wild West show of, uh, that went on during that time, at least part of it, and but so I don't know whether he saw Sitting Bull or not. But he knew about Tom Mix, and Buffalo Bill. And now he didn't talk about Annie Oakley, but she must have been part of that, okay? But here's the thing, is what I can tell you is that from his mouth to my ear came these words, that I have seen the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, okay? Yeah, he was kind of a cool guy. When he was feeling good, because he had angina pectoris, and so sometimes he really felt bad because the nitroglycerin that he had to take in order to alleviate the heart pain took some time to take in, and oh God, the poor guy moaned and groaned, but then the nitroglycerin would kick in, and the pain to his heart would stop. And he helped me actually. I had a Märklin, what they call it in Germany, a Märklin Baukasten, which is kind of I guess Legos has replaced the Märklin Baukasten. He helped me build a truck, and all that kind of stuff. He knew how to make it work. We had all these parts because it was all metals and screws, that had to go together. And you can look that up. Märklin probably still makes that, because there got to be some kids, that don't just play with the iPhone, and maybe they still play with Märklin. And of course, that was our entertainment back then. If you had this kind of proclivity, to build things. And I guess I did, because, hey, my father was, great mechanic, great builder. He could fix anything. My grandfather was the same thing. As a matter of fact, they were kind of in competition from time to time. But what I also wanted to mention, is really funny, is, he used to talk to me about his friends. And one of his favorite stories, I think, was he had this friend that could actually fart on command, And, I mean, this was entertainment in those days, So this guy's name was Turno. I remember that. And so he used to say, we would tell Turno, fart. And Turno could fart on command, So, I mean, that's, yeah. So my grandfather, well, then he passed away in Marbach am Neckar in Germany, and that was after the Russians really beat him up pretty badly in Siberia, because, they took, every available male, and for hard labor in Siberia. And I think I talked about in one of the videos about that, because he also told me, about life in Siberia and how he was able to get on the list of prisoners to be released back to Germany. And so what happened is that he actually made friends with the guards there. And the peculiar thing was that he discovered that he had a special talent that he said he did not know. He had the vision and the skill and dexterity to carve exotic animals out of wood. And the guards loved that. Evidently, he could carve an elephant, a cheetah, lions, and he made these presents for the guards. And so that may have had something to do why his name was moved up in the list of people that were released, because not everybody died in Siberia. Some of the Germans were actually released, especially, if the Russians were satisfied that, they didn't harm anybody, And my grandfather just provided jobs and taught people about cloth manufacturing machines. weaving machines, and that was his expertise. He knew how to do that. One thing, he never let on that he was overwhelmed or overcome with thoughts about the fact that his wife just kind of disappeared. Because my grandmother just kind of disappeared. I mentioned that last time. But I thought this was, certainly unique and worth mentioning and so forth. And then on television, we just found out here a couple of months ago, I think it is now, Savannah Guthrie, the star of NBC4 morning news, basically taking Matt Lauer's place. Her mother was abducted and she just disappeared. So Savannah Guthrie's mother just disappeared. So that can even happen now, that people can just totally disappear. And I understand, that sometimes, if somebody really acts up really badly against the government in China, somehow they also disappear. So we don't know what happens to some of the people when they do disappear. Sometimes we find out and sometimes we don't. Anyway, so yeah, my grandfather Schlessner, I didn't know him long enough, and I was really young. I was, let's see, in the 50s. I was 8, 9, 10 years old, that kind of thing. And so I was pretty much self-absorbed. I had my own problems, and then here was this old guy moaning, and oh man, it was not pleasant to be around him when he was sick. I tried to be away, but my mom told me an interesting story, and I don't know whether I actually mentioned that last time, but never mind. I'll mention it again. The day before he died, they were sitting on a couch together, talking about something, probably listening to radio, because that's what we used to do. We had no television. And listening to radio was wonderful. Believe me, as a matter of fact, I still enjoyed listening to Art Bell, the voice of the desert. I love the radio. Anyway, so they were listening or to the radio or whatever, and he said to my mom, hey, tomorrow I've got to go with this guy, And she says, well, who's that? And he said, well, the one between us here. And shivers went down her spine because she was sitting right next to him. There was no room for another person there. The next day he died. And that's a real story, okay? That's a real story. So, maybe Shakespeare, has something when he told whoever did Horatio, there's more things between heaven and earth than thought of in your philosophy. So keep that in mind, Do we know everything? Hell no. Think about it. If you just take a broad brush, what do we know about the universe? We think we know all this kind of stuff. They're working on life extension. We're going to be immortal, because we can regenerate cells and stuff like this. And Google is really working on it. They're spending $13 billion, on just extending life, for humanity. And I don't know where the hell that's going, But, if you think about it in big, broad brush, what we know of the universe right now. Well, we know about a Big Bang, or at least we think we do. We know about black holes and, if there's no light, then the sky is bedecked in stars. It's just amazing, actually, if you're not near a city, to look at the sky. Our kids here growing up, they think, oh, there's a sky here and there, that kind of thing. But because they're all obscured. But the thing is that's only 5% of what's actually in the universe in terms of energy, mass, and so on. well, the mass that we know of, is about 5%, and holy shit, the universe, is the mass inside the universe is accelerating fast, because at the very edges, as far as we can see, it looks like, the stars are going faster than the speed of light. Of course, nothing goes faster than the speed of light because, it's space expanding, um, which makes the light appear to go faster. Anyway, but it's accelerating, the Hubble constant, tells us, that there's an acceleration to the whole thing. So we just don't know much. But anyway, actually, I think I'd like to do a video on my thoughts, about the beginnings of life and stuff like this. Probably we'll do that soon. But in any case, I really hope to make more videos like this, because I do want somebody in the future, be able to resurrect me as a hologram, and then talk to me, and that hologram will have access to all this data that I've created. I've created some 60-some videos now. And we'll, and of course I repeat myself because I know I've talked about this before, but that's okay. But it's not that I will live longer, of course, but it would be kind of fun to leave this a legacy, because what I really regret is not making more movies and audios of my parents, or maybe my grandparents, but my parents. I had the technology. We had unwieldy TV cameras, video cameras and stuff, and, beta format tape and so forth, and, VHS tape. And, I just didn't do enough of that, So the reason I'm doing these videos is, partly is because of my regret of not memorializing my parents as much as I could have, Not just should have, but could have, and I didn't, So I'm doing it for me, and for you, and for whoever may ever be interested in hearing me talk, nonsense and stuff. Anyway, that was the dog moving my camera. Jeez, Chris, Let's see. So I think we've kind of come to an end here, because, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about my grandfather for. And but if in the video you ask a question, maybe I have an answer to it. In any case, I bid you farewell, auf Wiedersehen, and so long.